This is Debrief, your monthly briefing on the developments in industry policy in Australia and the impacts of digitalisation, decarbonisation and diversification on business and industry. Here is James Scotland with the Head of Industry Development and Policy for the Australian Industry Group, Louise.
We should talk about India today, Louise. There's been an election a few months ago, and since then, lots been happening. What have you been noticing?
Yes, India is certainly making strong attempts to engage with the world, and particularly with Australia, and likewise Australia is really focusing on India. It's sometimes positioned by the government as an alternative trading partner to China. I don't think it was definitely not there. I'm not sure if it will get there, but it's certainly making good inroads as part of that sort of diversification strategy. Last week, Australia had a visit from the Commerce Minister, who's sort of the Trade Minister from India, Goyal. He's quite an interesting character. Had the benefit of being to a few sessions that he's moderated. He moderated a great session at B20 last year. You know, India was host. They landed on the moon. They're very bullish, very say arrogant, but very confident in their place in the world. And he lined up trade ministers from a range of countries, including China, the US, the UK, I think perhaps Korea, Australia, maybe someone else who was left off the hook. And then he just basically mocked them all in the session, particularly the UK. You know, what do you regret leaving the EU? And was that the biggest mistake that any country could ever make? And mocking everyone, mocking China for not being part of TPP, and, you know, RCEP's not that great and we didn't want to sign up to it.
He said the quiet part out loud, did he?
Yes, he did. But anyway, it was really interesting to watch how the different they all had to step up, I can assure you. Anyway, so he's quite a character. Anyway, he was in Australia. And it was a good spotlight on the relationship with India. And I think in our show notes we can link to a new research note that we are releasing on the trade with India, particularly post ECTA, which was our a mini FTA. It wasn't a comprehensive, substantial FTA. It was sort of the bare minimum. I remember talking to the negotiator and I said, is it comprehensive? She said, it meets the qualifications. To be called an FTA. Yeah. So anyway, it doesn't include investment, doesn't include a few things. But when we, I won't get into the detail here, but when we dug in, we could see that although it wasn't comprehensive, the tariffs that were reduced on particular products did start to diversify our relationship with India at the very least. You know, we've exported a lot of coal, a lot of gold, particularly around wedding season. Gold for the wedding season, not coal. Coal all year round. And, you know, so that's sort of our traditional exports to India, but this broadened that base and had more elaborately transformed manufactured products, more seafood, etc. So that's really promising. And I think it shows that, you know, India's making small steps. I mean, perhaps it is a bit frustrating for all of us, particularly those of us who are part of the RCEP talks. You know, RCEP was certainly held back a bit by India being involved and everyone trying to keep them in the room, and then ultimately they didn't join the FTA. So just a reminder for those who aren't on top of it all the time, like me, RCEP is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's a free trade agreement for the Asia-Pacific region, all of the ASEAN countries and their FTA +1 partners. So that's Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea and China. And India also has an FTA with ASEAN, so they were part of the negotiations, really held us back on many things because of their concerns, but ultimately didn't sign. I mean, this is, you know, one of my wheelbarrows, is that what you call it? But anyway, one of my things that
the barrows that you're pushing, yes.
is, you know, we all use, because my linguistics background, we all use the same words, but we rarely mean the same thing. So our FTA with ASEAN, the Australia-New Zealand FTA with ASEAN, covers around over 95% of tariff lines. So there's only very few really sensitive products that are not captured with a tariff reduction. So much so that many ASEAN companies use that FTA for intra-ASEAN deals, trade.
Yeah, right. Yep,
Because, of course, you don't have to just use it with Australia and New Zealand. India's FTA with ASEAN only covers 70% of tariff lines. So it's not, it doesn't include everything. They have a lot of sensitive, they have more sensitive areas than apparently Australia and New Zealand. So, small steps, bring them along. But I think the results that we're seeing from ECTA, and of course the negotiations continue. So they're still talking, they're still trying to improve that deal, include investment and a few other things.
So to put it into context, if you can get the picture right, India is a emerging modern economy. It's very large. It's the largest population in the world. It is an economy that could be alternate to China for us, and so it's important. And we need to build our import and export market. We are putting together a FTA, but we already have an FTA with RCEP, which includes India. And
it doesn't include India. India didn't sign on. The door's open for them, but no, they did not sign on.
But we do also have an FTA with ASEAN, which India is part of as well. So we have
India's not part of ASEAN. No.
Okay, right, got it. So India's out of all of this, and we need some sort of agreement with India if we're going to build a strong relationship with an emerging economy. Is that the fun?
That's right. So we've got our initial FTA, which is called ECTA, which, to be honest, when it was announced, we weren't that enthusiastic about. But now 3 years on, looking at the data that the research and economics team has interrogated, we can see that it has had an impact and meant that there are new exporters to India.
How are the exports going, or import-export? How's our trade going with India? Is it growing?
Well, it's certainly growing on the back of this sector. So I think it's around 20 million trade. Now it's around 30, the high 30s. So it's certainly growing in the last few years.
Yeah, it's still small though, isn't it?
It is small, and
wow.
it's a difficult market. It's practically a federation like Australia. So although Modi, is the national president, or prime minister, it's not, he doesn't have absolute rule. So, it's very complex. Anyone who's been to India, complex language, cultural, religious settings.
Totally different all the way across the country. Yep.
That's right. The experience that you might have in Mumbai is completely different to what you might have in Chandigarh or somewhere like that. They're very different. So, and for Modi's credit, it's a big change. So they've had a really large informal economy, and which when you have an informal economy, and there's people just poor and not part of the formal economy and economic inclusion. One of the challenges of having an informal economy is that there aren't people paying taxes. So from a government point of view, they have huge needs. There's, huge need to sort of support a huge population. Where are they getting the income from? So until recently, about 80% of the income came from taxing imports. So, it's very easy for Australia to say, well, look, just open your economy. It's much easier. People have cheaper products, just reduce your tariff. But it's not just about protecting local industry, and that's very loud, and, advocate for their own interests. But it's also, where is the government going to have an alternative source of income? So that a few years ago when Modi came, introduced demonetisation, which was quite a shock to everyone. I had some Indian currency that I can no longer use. Everyone was sort of affected. And
it came in fast too. It shocked us all, didn't it? Like, it's just
it had to come in fast. So it really changed things. And I was in India just last month, and much higher take up of digital payments, far less of a cash economy than it used to be.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about digital, but before we get there, I think, I was reminded by what you're saying about how large and diverse India is. Well, when we were talking about the Indian elections a while ago, I did some research, and whilst we in Australia vote on a particular day, India is so diverse it goes over a couple of months, and they have I read that the government said that every Indian citizen must be able to vote. So they had these thousands of people with voting machines on back of, camels and horses and trucks and cars going up into the mountains and out into the desert and saying, here, you get to vote, press this button here. But it took months to do because it's such a diverse country and so many people. It's hard to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest elections. Either that or Indonesia, either or, I think they'll be.
Yeah, both. Well, Indonesia's an archipelago, so that's pretty difficult. But this is just one massive, big landmass, which brings us to this idea of the concept of digitalisation. We say on this podcast that you need a digital economy in this world, and of course we've all spoken to Indian call centres in the past. What's it like? Is it a digitalised economy, or are they a long way off that? You said before there's more digital transactions happening. Just give us a picture of what it's like over there right at the moment.
Yeah, well, when you go there and you see, everyone sort of, I shouldn't say everyone, but, high take-up of mobile phones, apps, etc. I mean, a lot of like Didi and a few other apps, coming out of India. Often, sometimes with these countries when the sorts of countries where you don't have that huge infrastructure, sometimes they go straight to digital, which can be helpful, which makes it easier for people and for countries for that evolution. I think it's still bureaucracy though. There's still signatures required. People who've imported into India will know hard copies, wet signatures, wet stamps, all those sorts of things are still required. So the transition's not there. What I do find interesting, even though it's quite a dichotomy, there are big places very high tech and then still low tech. One of the challenges though is when we think about global trade rules on digital, India is one of the loudest voices of wanting to put tariffs on the movement of data, and that's primarily, as I said, because they need income. So they
see their stock of trade too, isn't it? These call centres they're not a myth. They have got massive call centres there. Yeah.
They do. But if they start, I think they don't understand that would actually compromise their business model because, the Philippines could take up that. There's lots of other countries that can easily use call centres and with educated English speakers. Once you start taxing data moving across your border, why would anyone set up be reliant on that? Why would anyone set up a call centre? Why would anyone use, outsourced IT support or IT development? A lot of Hollywood movies rely on data contributions from India. There's huge amounts. What that they're focusing on is what they call sovereign data. Some countries are starting to talk about it. India's further ahead, where they see that the data that comes from the 1.2 billion people's phones wandering around, which is being mined by Facebook or Meta, Alphabet, all those sorts of companies, that is a sovereign resource. That is their natural resource. And so these foreign companies, modern colonizers coming in and exploiting our natural resources is not viewed positively. And that's part of the argument.
Well, you mentioned India as being an alternative to China, possibly, and there's some understandable similarities. My question is this: if in dealing with China, you can buy anything from total crap, as a technical term, to the top end, the very, very best. And when I was in marketing, the photographers used to tell me you could get absolute rubbish cameras from there, but also, the modern version of the German Hasselblad. You can just, whatever you want, you can get from China. You said that India put people on the moon. They've got some high tech, they've got some low tech. Is it an alternative to China or not yet?
Well, the thing is, 121 countries around the world have China as their number one trading partner. And that's not because they've all lost their minds and, decided it. China decided that.
Yeah, sure.
And China made it really easy to buy stuff from. So I remember once explained it to me that, if you think about going to either China or India to buy something as approaching a photocopier. So the China photocopier, you walk up, you put in your piece of paper, you press a button and out it comes exactly what you want. Exactly, exact replica. You go up to the Indian photocopier. First of all, you've got to make sure you've got to ask permission to approach it. Then you've got to work out what the special code is to request a copy. You put it in. It's not coming out exactly the same. It might be it will be the wrong size, upside down, wrong shape, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference at the moment. But if India decided, if they said, right, we are going to supply the world, they could do it, but there's just so many internal challenges. And often, I think what people sometimes miss, perhaps overlook, when looking at really, like there's countries, Mexico, South Africa, etc., high opportunity. Brazil is another good one. Really, huge population, huge opportunity. Why is it so hard? Why doesn't anyone fix and make it easy to do business? Well, if you're a local business and you know all the rules, and you know the high context culture, and you know who to talk to and how to navigate things, it is pretty easy. Yeah. So why would you change anything? Why would you make it easier for foreign competitors to come in? Uh-huh. So there is always in these countries, there is a sort of an incumbency in not wanting reform, not wanting change, because it suits them very nicely.
And bureaucracies change slowly anyway. Embedded interests. India is part of the Quad, if I remember, which is the Quadrilateral Agreement on Defence. But also they made some overtures towards Russia at times. So is there any restrictions in Australians doing business with India, or is it straightforward?
No, there's no restrictions on doing business with India. So on defence, there's always export controls and the ultimate customer. So obviously companies have to be careful with that. And especially with AUKUS and the various reforms, remember the ITAR reforms that were nothing to do with ITAR reforming and all about our own reforms. So
have a listen to our last episode for more details on that, I think.
Yeah. So those new rules, particularly, with the exports to anywhere, require a bit more extra attention. But yes, India has been a sort of a non-aligned. It's both non-aligned but also leader of the global south. It's sort of plays both ways.
It's good at that, though, isn't it? In many ways, it can it can be sort of a bit amorphous. It can sort of be whatever. The other issue about not just India but in international trade is the question of anti-dumping, and this is a bit of a segue because there's been lots going on in anti-dumping. Let's pick that up now. Well, first off, what is anti-dumping, and then let's talk about what's happening.
So anti-dumping or trade remedies is to address the impact of products. It's always products, never services, being dumped in the market for less than cost price, which means that they
they sell it to us for less than what they can sell in their own country, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's either and sometimes because there's subsidies from the government, or it's all sorts of sort of complex calculations on how you get that, but it's lower than the cost it makes to the cost of making the product. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember literally doing Marketing 101 and learning that was a market entry strategy. But anyway, market entry strategies don't pay much attention to global trade rules. Primarily, it's used in metal, so aluminium, steel, those sorts of products. Sometimes, commodity products often, where it's difficult to distinguish between sort of the different qualities. So steel, aluminium, paper, those sorts of products. And I sit on the government's International Trade Remedies Forum. So there's producers, importers, unions, industry, a whole lot of representatives, and it's our job to monitor the system and to advise the Minister of Industry on any reforms. And I've been chairing or co-chairing with my colleague from the CFMEU Manufacturing a subcommittee to looking at strengthening and simplifying the system. So we've put up a range of recommendations as a package, not as individual recommendations, thinking of, how can we give importers greater certainty and but also industry, greater transparency. And we've got some old rules within the Anti-Dumping Act, Customs Act, that means that the Anti-Dumping Commissioner has to allocate resources not based on need but based on regulation. So there's certain timings and, cut-offs that mean that it's not necessarily where you put resources to address an issue, but just because there's, the way applications work, cut-offs, etc. And some of those rules don't even align to what our peers and competitors do. So we put up a whole bunch of recommendations to the ITRF, and then hopefully we'll get that through and go up to the minister.
It's for me, it's a little bit complex. As a marketer, if I've got excess stock sitting in my inventory that I need to get rid of, I've already got sunk costs into it. I don't care what I get for it, and I can sell 20,000 units to Fiji at half the cost price. I've got good recovery, but that could get picked up to saying no, it's dumping. Well,
if you've
kind of
yeah. So it is quite complex. If that action has damaged local industry.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? If you're selling against a local product, that's the problem. If you're taking a unique product in there, it's not really going to be an issue for anyone.
No, that's right. So that's right. It can't be. Yeah, that needs to be substitutable products, which is why aluminium, steel are usually captured. I mean, the reason why I specified it has to be goods, I just find it really interesting that no one took an anti-dumping claim against Uber, because that's what they did. They came in, undercut the local industry, disrupted everything.
Oh, yeah.
Technically, could have been a dumping, but it's not for services. It's only for goods.
Oh, I'm going to chew on that for a while now. What's going to happen with this committee that you're on?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's a lot of voices. I think we've done, given the diversity of voices in the subcommittee, I think we've done a great job. And then we'll see how it goes through the broader ITRF. There's some of the things there that have been, I'll give you an example. Tariff concession orders. So we have very low tariffs and no tariffs under FTAs, but we still have some tariffs. If there is a tariff that applies for a product that Australia no longer manufactures at all, you can apply for a tariff concession order, which means that for 5 years you won't have to pay tariffs when you bring those products in, because you can prove that there's no local industry.
Yeah.
But, is there, through just weird sort of administrative burdens, you sometimes have to check that there isn't an anti-dumping order on these products. So we want to match the two. So if there's a TCO, just have an automatic. You can't put it, like if someone lost their head in industry and tried to game the system and say, let's have an anti-dumping claim on this product. And we'll say, well, actually, there's already a TCO that doesn't apply. So, cross each other out. That's one thing. The other recommendation at the moment, there's a particular review done by the Productivity Commission, which is odd. Productivity Commission every year writes a report saying the anti-dumping system is wrong. It's too much industry support, needs to be got rid of. So why give them the responsibility to be part of the problem that they see? We think that review should be with the Commission. Those with the expertise, those who are on the ground understanding it. So some like little tweaks that would seem obvious. That's what we've put up.
Yeah. Watch this space, as we often say. Next topic, and it actually goes back to India. Modern day slavery. Is India an area of concern when it comes to modern day slavery? And in a broader question, what's happened this month? Because there's been a bit of movement, I think. Yeah,
so every country technically is at risk of engaging in modern slavery.
When there's a broad demographic, if you like, when there is a potential of very low income people, that's got to be a heightened risk, though, surely.
Well, it's certain. So there are certain countries, and yes, importers from India should be conscious of it. There's also the other sort of calculation to think about is the sector. So TCF, textiles, seafood, there's a range of products. Sure. Interestingly, at our member reference group for anti-slavery, we had the New South Wales Anti-Slavery Commissioner, only anti-slavery commissioner we have in Australia at the moment. And he presented. So
that took out my next question was, how many are there? So there's only one at the moment. Okay.
So there's only one. New South Wales has its own legislation, and then there's the federal legislation. So they're at the moment recruiting for the national commissioner. But New South Wales, their anti-slavery or modern slavery rules only apply to New South Wales government entities, but it means that any Australian or any company, wherever you're from, but who supplies to a New South Wales government entity will need to show that they comply with, or they have sort of remediation and
comply means you've taken reasonable steps to ensure.
And ensure not just yourselves, but your supply chain.
Yeah.
So, and a government entity is quite broad, so it includes universities, prisons, hospitals, whatever.
Big purchases. People that buy a lot.
Yeah. So their priorities that they're starting off with is facilities management, particularly cleaning. And so that's looking at Australian companies delivering cleaning services. This other priority is on ICT, because sometimes in the supply chain there is modern slavery. And it's not just – so modern slavery is also forced labour, so thinking of, prison workers in China and all that sort of stuff. And next year it will be domestic agriculture.
Wow. And so this is only for New South Wales at this stage where they have to report, or is it only New South Wales government entities that have to report?
Only New South Wales government entities have to report.
But they will be asking their supply chain.
That's right. The federal regulation is already well in play, which means that if you are a company that's captured, you would already know this, but if you supply to a company that is captured under the legislation, and that's by size, you will have to report. So one thing that we're trying to do on modern slavery is help those companies who aren't directly captured but are captured by virtue of their commercial relationships to be a bit more proactive, not just constantly reacting, here's a new form to fill out, like having their own report, understanding the legislation so that they know what their commercial partner will need to report on, and so that they can be more proactive rather than, I've got this new form to fill out and they're asking all these weird questions. Sometimes, lawyers get hold of these things and they ask weird questions that are unnecessary. So really being proactive on understanding what is required of you, and so giving that to your customer or supplier. One other thing is we're looking at what the ACCC can do to make it easier for companies to collaborate on these things. So ACCC is very, very focused on anti-collusion, anti-competitive behaviour, particularly amongst competitors. But competitors sometimes do need to talk if they're going to address these systemic problems in supply chains. So how can they do that safely? How can we make it easier for them to share information so that suppliers and customers aren't giving same but slightly different information to multiple players?
Yeah, it's quite possible to be a buyer and a supplier, or to be a competitor and a supplier. It's we actually encourage that with a small economy. We need to be working together. So again, a complex issue. What should this is a Dorothy Dixon. What should members do if they're not sure about their modern day slavery position?
They should join so this is for members, anti-slavery member reference group. What we do is we meet. So I sit on the Federal Advisory group with the Attorney General, and we meet sort of every 2 to 3 months. And then a week after, we have the member reference group meeting. So I give them an update from the meeting. What's government thinking? What are they focusing on? Any particular insights in the reporting regime? And we usually have a guest speaker. So that's why we had the New South Wales Commissioner. Sometimes we might have a large company about what they do. Hopefully we'll have someone next meeting, which will be in the first week of December. We've had a speaker who was part of the UN committee that formulated some of the guidelines on slavery. So while we say it's New South Wales law and federal law, actually it is based on the UN guidelines.
I noticed you sit on that committee as well. In a former life, I heard my PA say once when she was asked what I did, what does your boss do? She said, he goes to meetings for a living.
Yeah. That's it. Anyway, and sorry, you did ask what people should do. They should email industry.policy@argroup.com.au if you'd like to register interest in getting invitations to the next meeting.
Yes, good idea, and encouraged to do so. We should go. It's our time's up again for this month. Before we do go, you're a linguist. Have you got a favourite? This is putting you on the spot. Have you got a favourite Indian word? We've got such a great language. Have you got a word that you just sort of think, I love that word?
Well, yes. Prepone. It's the opposite of postpone.
Really?
So, yes, I've never heard such a word until I'm getting to India. And, of course, it makes sense. If you postpone something, prepone. The reason why I always remember it is because I spoke to someone whose flight had been preponed,
Oh,
which means brought forward, unbeknownst to them, until they arrived at the airport.
yeah, that sounds like an awful word to me because I'm a procrastinator, so I like postpone. I love it. It's been a good chat. Thank you so much, Louise. It's always good to do this catch-up. That's it for this episode of Debrief. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, remember to like and subscribe, and please tell others about the show. Feel encouraged to view our posts on LinkedIn. Go to our page, go to my page or Louise's or Australian Industry Group, and please share the post about the show to your connections and network. Thank you. And as we always say, if you are as opinionated as we are, please give us feedback or send a question or comment to industry.policy@argroup.com.au. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, James.
Let's talk again next month.